In this video, I'm going to be going over all of the books that I read or listened to in the month of July 2023. I made it through 6 books that I read, and then I listened to 2 audiobooks this month. And I do have my phone here. I'm going to just make sure I don't miss anything and make sure I get everything in the right order. So the first book I finished this month was Blue Mars by Kim Stanley Robinson. And this completed the Mars trilogy for me. This was a big, dense book. It took a while to read this. I almost finished it in June, but kind of bled a little bit into July, and I wrapped it up there. So I did a review on the channel for this, but it is a spoiler-based review for the whole trilogy. So unless you've read the whole trilogy, I probably wouldn't watch that video unless you think you'll never read the series ever. So there was that. Then the next one I finished was an audiobook, and this was called The Big Picture: On the Origins of Life, Meaning, and the Universe Itself by Sean Carroll. And some of you may recognize Sean Carroll. He has a pretty popular science-based YouTube channel. That's how I found him and watched some of his videos, realized he did some books as well, and picked this one up at my library and listened to it. It was pretty interesting. I've listened to a lot of books that go over the same topics, so there was a little bit of repetitive stuff, but there was also some really cool stuff that he brought up, and he just explains things in a really approachable way for laymen kind of like me when you're dealing with big, dense topics like this. So then the next book I read was The Day of the Triffids by John Wyndham. Now this was a great book. This was part of my Masterpieces of Science Fiction series that I'm doing. And I did a video review for this, so you can go check that out. It's spoiler free. But this was the first book from John Wyndham that I read, and I really, really liked it. It really exceeded what I thought the book was going to be. Even after I got into the book and started reading it, I just thought it was going to kind of be a flat book, but it really surprised me. Then the next book I read was another one in the series that I'm doing, the Masterpieces of Science Fiction, and it is an Easton Press version of Samuel R. Delany's book, The Einstein Intersection. And this one I did not enjoy very much. Once again, I did a video review for this. You can go and look at that if you want, but this was my biggest disappointment for the month. I don't really want to get in too much why it was a disappointment, but I'm hoping that some of the other books by Samuel R. Delany hit a little bit better for me. There is Babel 17 that's on the list that I'll be reading. And I've also heard Nova is a pretty approachable book by him. So I want to give him another shot. This one just didn't do it for me. Okay, the next book I read was, I don't have a physical copy of it. I read it on my e-reader. And this was a suggestion by one of my viewers on this channel, and it was Elder Race by Adrian Tchaikovsky. This was a really cool book. It's actually a novella. It's about 200 pages. I did a spoiler-free review for this on the channel too. And it was just really neat. There was, the book kind of alternates chapters between 2 characters. And when you get a chapter by one character, it's kind of fantasy. It reads kind of like a fantasy book, and then the other character, it reads more like a science fiction book. So it was really cool how Adrian Tchaikovsky did that, and in a little 200-page book, it packed a lot in there. So that was a lot of fun. And then I finished another audiobook. Since I read through the Mars trilogy, I've really been into Mars and trying to understand a little bit more about what it would take to get there and terraform it. because, of course, Kim Stanley Robinson's book is a work of fiction, but there's a lot of fact in there too. And so I listened to A Case for Mars by Robert Zubrin. And this book was good. This was written in 1996. And so it's a little outdated. In his introduction, it was like 15 years later, so 2011 when he did the introduction. He talks about some of the things that have changed since when he originally wrote the book till then, and kind of tried to bring some of the ideas up to the current time. I thought it was pretty fascinating. There was a lot of cool ideas that he came up with. He does criticize NASA a lot, especially in the beginning of the book, and it's mostly criticizing the fact that to get to Mars, we really need a collective goal, kind of like the space program had in the 60s. You know, the whole country got behind that. Everybody was for it, and we accomplished that goal. So he's kind of saying that we need the goal to get to Mars and then get everybody behind it, and it's something we could accomplish. And then I did a little research afterwards, and it's a very decisive book. I think he gets a lot of criticism from others on this book, and I didn't dig into it too much, but overall it was pretty interesting. There was definitely some parts that I liked more than others. Then the next book I read was another book in my series, Masterpieces of Science Fiction. And this was A Door into Ocean by Joan Slonczewski. That's a hard name. And this was a really fun, interesting, different book. I did a review on the channel, so you can check that out. But the story is based on this distant part of the galaxy or universe, somewhere where humans inhabit one planet, and they're pretty much like humans we know. And then there's another planet, they rotate each other, and the other planet is a water-based planet. It's completely covered with oceans. It's inhabited by these kind of evolved female race of humans, and they're pacifists, and there's a bunch of conflict that happens between them being pacifists and a patriarchal, broader society kind of coming into more contact with them. Really interesting book. Joan's writing is amazing, and I can't wait to eventually find some more of her books and read some of those. And then after that, the final book I read this last month was What Mad Universe by Frederick Brown. This was a really fun, kind of just lighthearted, kind of campy read. It had a little comedy and satire thrown in there, and it was a lot of fun. I needed it after kind of a more serious book like A Door into Ocean was. So that's everything I read and listened to in July. And then what I'm working on next, I've been slowly working on this collection of short stories called The Martians by Kim Stanley Robinson. And this is kind of a companion to the Mars trilogy. And since I finished that, I wanted to give these a shot. And I'm about halfway through. I'm just picking these up whenever I get some spare time. And when I finish this, I'm going to do kind of a spoiler-free overview of the whole Mars trilogy plus the short story collection, and give people an idea of what to expect, and if you even need to read some of these short stories, and kind of a video based on that. But the next actual novel I'm reading is another one in my series that I'm doing, the Masterpieces of Science Fiction, and it's called No Enemy But Time by Michael Bishop. And I'm just kind of starting this one, and so far it's pretty interesting. Not really sure where it's going, but just stay tuned and you'll see a video review of that one coming up shortly. So that's about it. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next video.